In this episode of Growing Your Sense of Self Through Self-Defense, I'm going to talk about why people are reluctant to work on growing the strength of their sense of self. Now, we see people who are very fit, working on improving their physical fitness, working on improving their physical fitness level. They run really far, but they're always looking to run further or get a better time. They can lift a lot of weights, but they're still in there pushing their limit to more reps or higher weights, or working on body sculpture, and they already look like some kind of a god or a goddess, but they're still looking to improve. There's no ultimate limit in those. Think of the guys who work the hardest. Like when Michael Jordan was the best basketball player in the world, he was also the basketball player that worked hardest at improving his skills in basketball. Because he still would miss shots sometimes. He would still get tired. He would still not make a play he thought he could have made. So he'll still work harder. They're the best golfers. They'll keep practicing and practicing because they don't make every shot as well as they could make them. They strike every ball as well as they could. So the best keep working to get better. There is no ultimate best. There's not perfection in people in whatever field they're endeavoring to be. And we all have a sense of self that can be strengthened, that can be improved upon. But do we see people consciously working on those, like we see them working in the gym or on the courts or on the golf courses or wherever, working to improve in the libraries or something? We don't see that, in part because we don't recognize ways that one can be working to improve one's sense of self. But I think there's another reason, a more fundamental reason that people do it. The people that we see working on are people who really see that they are in like dire need. They're at their rope's end, and they're really struggling with this or that, and they're going to therapy, and they say, I'm at the point where I'm in a depressed state. I need to do something about it. So we see those people do it, and we almost sort of, oh yeah, tough one. I'm glad I'm not in your shape, but we are. They're working it. We're not, or a few of us are. So I think the driving reason why people don't recognize the importance and the need to work on sense of self, some of it's ignorance, because we don't culturally talk about that, but there's almost a collective willingness to be ignorant on the topic. Because the hardest thing, the most frightening thing for a person with a low sense of self is being found out. Now, even if your sense of self is not low, it is lacking in some ways because it can never be maximal. So there's always room to grow. So acknowledging that, yeah, there's more I can grow is an acknowledgement of there is a lacking in some ways. And that's such a fundamental thing about the value we are as people, often unstated, that we don't want to acknowledge that. And the lower the sense of self is, unless you're at a point where I need to do something about it or life's not worth living, the harder it is to acknowledge that and do something about it. So in an earlier episode when I talked about why we, as a culture, or even beyond that, can't see things like the motivation for Stephen Paddock's mass murdering, our ignorance of the human condition, we don't want to see that because that hits too close to home. That's about us too. And we don't want to look at that. But in earlier episodes, I talked about the importance of going through the fear, the inner fear. You don't have to go someplace that's a dangerous neighborhood or spend time with people who you recognize or you perceive as dangerous people to be around. But things within, there's no avoiding that. And fears one might have about being found out, about being seen for who you are. Those are fears to go through, not to avoid. There's self-limitations if we try to avoid them. We've limited our lives doing that. And part of the purpose of this program, in the growing a sense of self, is to go through those fears, to recognize we have the strength, we have the Superman powers to go through those fears and come through it on the other side. Well, if we're dinged a little bit, largely unscathed, but for the better when we go through it. When Michael Jordan works exercises or does his drills or whatever he's doing when he's practicing, when he was at his peak, he come on the other side better than he was before going into it. However great he was, he's greater still. However great we are, or maybe not so great, we're greater still when we go through the exercise. It's not something to fear, something to go after, something to go through, something to embrace. That's what this program can do. Embrace it. Embrace yourself. There's nothing to fear. There's nothing to hide from, run from. Understand and gain. Thank you for your time. Kamsahamnida. Toodles.